Mr. Buckles, we missed you at the school, at our workshop.
I came in earlier and I got all my questions answered.
No, she's talking about
the school improvement workshop.
I know, I did. I got my questions answered. Could you pass me that paper? I got it. Jane.
Do we want to? Oh, we've already.
Jane.
I think
Okay, we can.
absolutely.
My ear.
Public comment is not on the agenda for this special meeting, but if any of you would like to make public comment, you can see Miss Cormany.
Okay.
But you need to do it now.
Well, we won't be finished by then.
We may not be finished by 3:30,
We're not
but
gonna be finished
We
then.
may have to recess and do the 3. I don't know. This attorney will advise.
Cut my ear shaving the hair off of it, so I'm gonna be bleeding.
okay.
Nikki.
We're going to open the meeting. The superintendent has requested to make a statement before we get started.
Get one of these.
Y'all have a statement?
Hey, good afternoon. Since the previous board meeting on May 17th, I was contacted by Sheriff DeLoach with information regarding his plan to train guardians from the 3 charter schools in Putnam County who had all approved the guardian plan for school security. He indicated that he was paying the costs for instructors already and wanted me to know that if I wanted to train the potential guardians from our school district, it would be at no extra cost. He also indicated that training supplies would also be provided at no cost, which included weapons and ammunition. I knew that our board had still not made a decision to implement the Guardian program or any of the school security options. The point was that our guardians would be trained at the most important time in the summer before planning for the next school year began, which also gave our school board the option to choose the Guardian program if they chose to do so. If our guardians did not receive training in June, it would cost the district precious time for training. And after talking to the sheriff, training would not be available in July. After speaking with Board Attorney Charlie Douglas about the training, we set up a time to speak with board members individually to make them aware of the training. We set up the meeting on Friday, June the 1st, due to Charlie being out of town for the first part of the week. After speaking with board members, the concern was raised about the board not approving the, quote, temporary duty elsewhere for 12-month employees. I was advised by Attorney Douglas to schedule a special board meeting for June the 5th at 3 p.m., which is this meeting, to allow board members to vote on approving the TDE for the training. A vote for the security options is scheduled for the regular school board meeting at 3:30 today. My concern as the superintendent is that the board does not approve TDE for employees now, and it has not been past practice to do so. The only time the board approves training is for out-of-state travel and for stipends for employees. The superintendent approves TDE for employees to be trained. It is my position that the board should not take a vote on this matter. As superintendent, I have acted within my authority to approve the paid training for the 12-month employees. Allowing the board to vote on approving TDE would be inconsistent with past practice and would set a precedent for future trainings. I understand that the subject of how to comply with the state mandate to provide increased security at our schools has been a difficult issue, and that board members, as well as the public, have strong feelings about how to best protect our children. However, it has been particularly disappointing for me to see quotes in the local newspaper attributed to one or more school board members accusing me of, number 1, doing something that was illegal, number 2, committing an ethical violation. In fact, a school board member was even quoted as having said that she consulted with the, quote, Commission of Ethics office in Tallahassee. She then implied that the ethics office supported her accusation that I have misused my office. In response, I would say that in approving TDE for training without board approval, I did what I and every other school superintendent in recent memory has done. I exercised my authority to approve training that did not involve out-of-state travel or the expenditure of any funds not already allocated to salary. Even as of right now, I have not been advised by the board attorney or any other person of any specific board policy, statute, rule, or regulation that I have violated. In fact, as stated above, I have acted in a manner that is consistent with past practices and I believe consistent with the authority vested in me as superintendent. If any board member believes that I have violated a policy, law, or established rule, I would invite them to specifically identify the rule, policy, or law which they believe I have violated. No one has done this to date. Instead, there have simply been general accusations of wrongdoing. This is not fair to me or those who I am doing my best to serve and protect, the students, teachers, and staff of our schools, and those who care about them. Finally, for a board member to imply that the Division of Ethics agrees that I have misused my power is, in my opinion, at best careless and at worst unethical in and of itself. I would ask the board member who publicly made this accusation to identify the person at the Division of Ethics with whom she spoke. I find it very difficult to believe that any person in authority at the Division of Ethics would offer an opinion that I or any public official is guilty of misuse of power without hearing from me and making certain that they have all the information necessary to make a decision. In sum, teachers report back to work in August, first week of August, approximately 8 weeks from now. This school district is required by statute to implement one of the options contained with a recently passed state statute which was designed to improve school safety. It is my hope that the board will soon make a decision as to which option the board intends to implement. However, the time remaining before teachers return for the next school year is short, and implementing any option chosen by the board will require time and planning if the chosen option is to be implemented in an effective and orderly fashion. In making the decision to allow volunteer school employees to train as serve as guardians under the TDE classification, I believe that I did nothing more than make reasonable preparations to implement the guardian program should the board ultimately decide to implement the guardian program. If the board does not decide to implement the guardian program, then the school district has not incurred one dime of expense over and above salaries that would have been paid regardless of the TDE assignment. If the board does decide to implement the guardian program, the training which I authorized may allow us to implement the program in a more organized, orderly, and efficient fashion than would otherwise have been possible given the time constraints we are working with. I believe that my actions were within my authority as school superintendent, consistent with past practices of authorizing TDE assignments without board approval unless out-of-state travel was involved, and in the best interest of the students, teachers, and staff within our schools. As superintendent, I have secured legal counsel that is allowed by school board policy. And Madam Chair, at this time I would ask that you allow Attorney Don Holmes to address the board of this matter.
Did you want to say something first, Ms. Jorgensen?
No, thank you.
Okay, Don.
Good afternoon. Don Holmes, 222 North 3rd Street, Palatka, Florida. It's my privilege to appear on behalf of Superintendent Surnsey. I don't wish to beg a fight, so it may be that my comments at this point are premature, and if so, I'm happy to sit down and wait for board discussion. I don't profess to be the all-out expert on all of your policies or state law when it comes to superintendents, but I have spent a little bit of time looking. And I would ask you to consider one thing. When I read the paper with the accusations of illegality and breach of ethics, I assumed that there must be some policy, statute, or rule that Mr. Surnsey acted in direct violation of in order to merit such a strong accusation. So I began to look. I called the board attorney to ask if he was aware of a specific policy and was advised that he wasn't. So I began to look in general, and while I see a number of general provisions in your policies that I believe support the superintendent's ability to act as he did, and I'll just mention two of them. I also found one policy that I think is directly on point, unless someone can tell me why it's not.
Mr. Holmes, if I could, I'm not connected, or I'd be able to quote you the statute. Statute overrides policy. The statute clearly says under duties and responsibilities of the superintendent. The board has powers. The superintendent has duties and responsibilities. And I can't quote the first half of the sentence. It's the first sentence. But it says he or she shall have responsibility over this, that, the other, blah, 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 blah. Provided, however, he or she shall first consult with the school board on all matters. I was not the person that made the remarks to the paper, but I also feel that way.
Well, may I finish then?
Let's hear
Well,
it.
but statute overrides policy. I don't care what the policy.
But
No doubt about it,
I would
but it's
have
always dangerous to quote a statute and not be able to quote a statute. The devil's in the details when you look at statutes, and the preamble and the other language in that statute might be controlling. But if you don't mind, let me, and I also assume that you don't intentionally pass policies that conflict with state statute, and if you do, you need to change them. So let me just mention a couple policies. They're your policies. I didn't draft them. I'm just looking at and working with what you've got. The first one says that, and this is in section 1030 policy, I'll quote it. Superintendent, as secretary and executive officer of the school board, shall have the responsibility for the administration and management of the district schools and for the supervision of instruction in the district. That's generic. I'll give you that. The second one I want to mention to you is policy 1010. In the third line of the first paragraph, it states the superintendent is responsible for the development, supervision, and operation of the school program and facilities. But here's the one that I found particularly interesting. It's in section 1130 under appointment, assignment, transfer, and promotion of administrators. And it states the school board authorizes the superintendent to temporarily reassign employees when the superintendent determines that it is in the employee's and/or school district's best interest. The superintendent shall seek school board approval for any temporary reassignment that will exceed 15 workdays. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I would submit to you that the TDE at issue in this case will not exceed 15 workdays. Unless you can differentiate for me why TDE is not in fact a temporary reassignment of an employee, then I would tell you that the policy I've just quoted to you directly supports and authorizes the action that Mr. Surnsey took. And I would certainly tell you that it raises enough questions so that anyone who would accuse him of being unethical or having committed an illegal act for following that policy has a pretty big hill to climb. So from my perspective, my point simply is, it appears to me as though he acted fully within his rights. He did not implement a program. He authorized training, a temporary duty assignment, and in fact he did that pursuant to or in accord with a specific one of your policies.
I have no problem with this. I wasn't talking about this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I misunderstood.
Board members accusing him of breaking the law unless you can come up with it and yada yada. So I was explaining that I believe he violated the law, but not on this.
Which law?
I have no problem with this. Mr. Douglas is trying to find it.
Okay.
I did send it to him.
now that Kathy said a few words, can I tell you from my experience?
Were you through? For now. Yes.
Okay.
On this, yes.
But you know, the superintendent
Thank you.
has statutory power over personnel. He has particularly statutory power over administrators and those who would serve in capacities such as an administrator. And the board has really very limited powers about that. And it can result in, if a board member powerfully objects enough, the superintendent can hire legal counsel and sue the board, which those are not productive situations. But I'm of the opinion that I've done it. If the superintendent so chose to send X, Y, Z, and 4 more employees to train on how to identify flammable storage and fertilizer and fuel, he can do that without consulting the school board, and you'll get a TDE request after the fact. He can send people to learn how to spot ingress and egress problems and anything that has to do with school safety and security and a variety of other issues. And that's why I was shocked at what I saw. But I mean, there may be something that I don't know about, like Mr. Holmes said. But I know.
What?
Well, for whatever he was accused of doing that was supposedly wrong. I mean, I don't see anything from my experience, and I know that if I was a superintendent and I wanted to send someone to be trained in touring prisons, I mean, I was sent to tour prisons to see where our children will wind up if they don't. I mean, there's a variety of things. This training would even further enable these employees to understand what if the majority of this board were to choose to hire off-duty people, it would help these folks to even understand what goes through their mind, and it is a very valuable training.
I have no problem with it.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make
Personally,
that clear. I don't see any violation.
I thought
press
that
that
the
in
only
favor.
reason we would have to vote is if we're approving additional money.
That's right.
But every job description I've ever seen lists all these things and duties and responsibilities, and at the end it says, and anything else you're asked to do. Pretty much it says that. So anything the superintendent in my book asks anybody to do, they really are required to do.
Other duties as assigned by
The
the
only
superintendent.
board issue here is if we pay the people who aren't being paid, the 10-month employees. And I understood that the 12-month employees were using, are they being paid? Or are they
TDE.
using?
TDE.
TDE.
No, it was said vacation time in
I
the,
thought they were
Yeah,
using.
well,
Taking
you did
vacation
mention that.
now until this meeting today.
And
Oh,
today
okay.
we
For
are,
the days they've already been trained.
you're asking us to approve paying all of them for the days they're being trained.
I'm not asking your approval for anything.
You
I'm
called
just
the
sa-
meeting, didn't you?
Well, I was told by the board attorney to do that, but I told those employees until we met and resolved it, that I asked them to take vacation time, and so that's why we're here now.
May I ask you, are we going to pay the 10-month employees?
That's what this is.
They are on their own time to train,
They're volunteering.
volunteering their time.
And it's only 15 days? It's not a month?
It's 15
It's
days.
166
hours
hours.
is that?
How is that?
Charlie, could you clarify? Because on the phone
11
call we had,
days.
it said it was actually more than 15 days. It was 30 days, the entire month of June I was told.
11 hours a
I have
day.
not been told.
Gator, where are you? How many total hours
Today, I've heard 15.
for all of the training?
15 work days.
15 work days at how many hours a day?
It varies based on the training.
But I mean, that
But it's
equals the total you
160
gave us
something
of
hours.
the number of hours that they would be trained.
No, there are days above and beyond.
Okay, so like weekend times and, okay, okay.
But normally, the superintendent would submit this to us after the fact as it
Right.
comes from staff.
Okay.
So it's
I'm
not
just
really
asking,
something the
we're
board
here.
would even need to do.
Problem.
So this is the concern, because I did tell the superintendent I'm hanging up and calling the governor's office, and they advised me to call the ethics complaint, because we have an annual professional development plan that we approve as a school board every year, determining what we are going to train our individuals on. This training is not part of our annual professional development plan. Therefore, it would not fall under the TDE and the normal scope of job description, as our attorney stated on the telephone. As we discussed it, we have a normal scope and duty of job descriptions. So we have the annual professional development plan approved by the school board with all the listings of our strategies, our curriculum, and what we plan to attest every year for. Treating firearms and guardian program is not part of that. Therefore, it is out of the scope of the normal job duty and scope. Therefore, TDE, which again, you sent us a text to say you're going to have them take vacation time, when I oppose, saying that this is regular school board hours. We pay them. That is not allowed to do without something that is in their normal scope of their job description.
May I
This-
speak?
Receiving
May I-
points for this training, by the way.
May I speak?
Sure.
There's been a little action, and tragedy that occurred probably since you developed your training curriculum. involved school shooting and the passage of something called the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission, an act. I would submit to you that a provision of that act specifically states each district school superintendent shall establish policies and procedures for the prevention of violence on school grounds, including the assessment of and intervention with individuals whose behavior poses a threat to the safety of the school community. It would appear to me that while you may have in fact established a curriculum that might have been very well reasoned at the time, circumstances have changed. We are living in a different world. And to say that the superintendent is not allowed to take knowledge of and notice of something the rest of the world is noticing, in my opinion, is arbitrary and not very well thought out. So from our perspective, in authorizing the TDE, he is complying with state statute. He is attempting to make this district better prepared so that if you decide to implement the Guardian program, you won't be caught short and in a panic trying to get people trained. In conversations with the Sheriff Deloach, and he can speak for himself. I've heard him speak. He's very eloquent. He advised me that if this training doesn't occur now, it can't occur in July. He only has this slot available because he has to have training for his own people, and the staff time that's allotted will permit him to train the guardians now or never. So if anything, it would appear to me that you should be applauding the farsightedness of your superintendent in taking advantage of a cost-free program to have guardians available in case you decide to approve the Guardian program instead of chastising him and accusing him of illegality. But that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, that is. Thank you. So I would like to ask our board attorney another question about the normal scope and duty of a job and laid out in how that performs about training and this annual professional development plan that we do have lots of discussions about what, and that is something approved. So if there was an addendum to that, that would be something that is board approved. So if this was something that we decided we wanted to add to our annual professional development plan, we would have added in a board meeting. We would have added it in a workshop. There would have been a lot more discussion than after the fact. And again, I want to say that this discussion was about forcing vacation time to volunteer. That's what was discussed in an email and in a text from the superintendent.
No, I did not force them. I asked them to, if they were going to train, they would have to take vacation for until this was resolved today.
Okay, and
nobody forced anybody to do anything.
And again, the time was the entire month of June. That was set. Did every board member hear the entire month of June? Because this was a private conversation. This wasn't in the sunshine, as I don't appreciate at all. So did you hear the entire month of June?
I didn't hear anything.
Oh, you didn't have the conversation.
Really,
phone call,
it's incumbent on the superintendent to communicate. He had the board attorney. I don't know, my conversation was completely in the sunshine because I didn't have other board members there.
Right.
We didn't either.
Well, I mean, she just said it
well, I
wasn't
mean,
in the sunshine.
inappropriate, this appropriate, when we have something of this magnitude, we've had all these workshops, it would be appropriate to do it in the sunshine. I'm not saying there's a violation.
He did state up front, though, that because of time, this was the best way to handle it. So, just for the record.
I have a question.
He did say that.
Okay.
Haven't we added workshops for whatever trainings for whatever reason that weren't on our original scope and sequence?
The superintendent
but it still
can
goes with
train
the job
employees
duties.
any way he wants to train them.
Yeah. Well,
It's a legitimate
Right.
training.
It's normal
but it
scope.
has been done.
It's under the normal scope of your job duties. If you're a principal, you're training to find out new curriculum, iReady training, all the other aspects, Marzano. But because it's in the scope of your job duties.
Where does it say that?
well, I
Can you
just
cite
say-
me to a provision that I can?
Read what I gave you.
Yeah, well, I'm asking about that you can only assign TDE if it's within the scope of your job duties. Where's that written?
If I can just add in, I do not believe that the superintendent has violated any law regarding TDE. My remark to him and to the other board members has been, it's a gray area. And ordinarily with TDE...
I didn't say that you had said that, Charlie.
Okay.
I didn't ever say that you had indicated that he had violated a law.
With TDE, I believe that those items that are trained on are ordinarily within the course and scope of the duties of that 12-month employee. So as some board members have used as an example, if the superintendent asks an employee to clean the parking lot or to mop the floors of the school, that would be within the superintendent's duties. Firearms training is a little different. That, up to this point, has not been included in the ordinary course and scope. We do have a piece of legislation now that permits school boards to elect that as an option for the district. That has not happened yet, but if the superintendent is considering whether to use district funds, which are primarily in the purview of the board, to allow district personnel, 12-month personnel, to attend those trainings, my comment to Rick was that if we're going to err, we may want to err on the side of board involvement in a discussion about the use of those funds. I did not tell Rick that he must have a school board special meeting regarding this topic. But in my view, if later there is some criticism from Tallahassee about how any of this was handled, that there could be no question that there was a good faith involved in a discussion that involved both the superintendent and the board.
If I could add one more thing, if a majority of this board were to pick a program like we discussed it the last time, where you had off-duty people, and they're arranged to come to school A on Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock and show up, and they call and say, hey, I've gone to Montana, I won't be back this month. Then you call the next one on the list, like calling substitutes. If you can't get someone, we may need this as a backup at some point. You don't know what we're going to learn as we get into this situation. I think it's well within his purview to assign any duties that he feels like is necessary. We've had pre-K teachers, this is serious, go to the airport, to the parachute jump school, and without board approval have loaded up parachutes, gone up and jumped out of airplanes in front of their students. Now, that wasn't something, I'm just giving you hypotheticals that people do.
On TV.
People do what people do.
We're gonna
These employees are doing what the superintendent has recommended, and he deems, all he has to do is deem it necessary for safety and security, and it's a go.
Well, can I say that it's 3:25, we do have a 3:30 regular meeting. I think
Do we want to do our public comment?
Well, I think the issue is, and just correct me if I'm wrong,
Thank you, Don.
the meeting today, and I had no problem with what the superintendent, personally, I felt like because of that clause, he can tell everybody that works for him to do whatever he wants to tell them, basically. But it was them having to use vacation time or the 10-monthers not being paid that we were going to vote on, whether or not to pay them.
I was
At a
unclear about
district. That's my understanding. Is that the purpose of this meeting? We can't stop the training.
So what
That's-
are the
you can do that.
expenses? As written in the agenda, the expenses we're talking about are TDE, correct?
The board attorney approved that in the agenda. So, at the time, we were talking about, there was a concern about the expenses of their salaries to be trained. So we put that on there, and then we discussed the issue today. And that's why I'm raising the issue that I'm acting within my authority to approve the TDE without the board
So there's
approval.
really no,
It's just.
And I'm just saying,
it's TDE.
right, it's strictly there's no additional cost whatsoever to the district.
Okay, just making sure,
Right.
because it's written that way.
I
on the-
understand.
So is there paperwork that has the TDE and the names of the employees?
Yes.
That's all public record?
Yep.
Okay, public record. So anybody that wants to know who the guardians are can ask that. Okay, that's great.
Well, they've already told us they would tell us. I mean, they can see their
I'm
cars
just
at
saying
the
that
college.
the general public will
I mean,
know.
they can see their
They
cars.
can do that.
Did anyone not accept after they were not able, if they
Wayne
weren't?
McLean, if you would like to make your public comment.
Sandy, were you asking me a question?
Here?
Out.
That's probably not public.
Wayne was here, he might have stepped out.
Oh, I just got this a little early. You want it for the next meeting. Okay, I'm sorry. It
I'd
was,
like to say something.
okay, Ms. Jorgensen would like to say something?
Okay, I think the majority of the board is fine with Rick assign, not all the board, but the majority is, the consensus of the board is okay. I would like to make a motion
Second.
That,
Make it. We've got to have the motion.
no, we didn't talk about this yet. You have no idea what I'm going to say. No, I would like to make a motion, however, that we use district funds to pay the volunteers. I want to, that's the motion, but I want to add, I still haven't made up my mind. I just love our employees, and they're willing to volunteer their time.
Well,
I could still vote no on this, and then I've wasted your time and money, but I do think it's fair to pay them.
Well, but I don't think it's fair for the 12-month employees to get paid and the 10-month don't.
No, I'm talking about the 10-month.
He doesn't even need our
All of
approval on
them.
this.
Oh, to pay the 10-month he does.
He could bring it after the fact. I mean, it's
Well-
really, I still think you're,
trying-
Is that another meeting?
He's trying to work with us.
Let me clarify, just for public record, the names and the TDE forms are exempt from public record because of security. So just want to make that clear in case somebody wants to try to find out who these people are.
But
Well, they can write out
I wanted to
the
ask,
call.
did any decide not to be trained because of this that we're discussing today?
No.
So
No.
they're serious?
Yeah, they're
about
serious.
it.
They'll
Yeah.
do it as volunteers.
I don't think they would be there if they
Yeah,
weren't serious.
okay, so that's what I mean.
After the teacher took 3 bullets last week up in the country, I can understand their concern as well, so.
So is this okay to take action in this meeting, Charlie? Because it's been 48,
Approval of expenses.
It was within 2 days.
but we didn't have, okay, so, but we didn't ask, we don't have a general idea of what the expenses are?
Charlie, we don't want to set a precedent
Whatever
here.
their TD
I wasn't,
is.
I was,
He doesn't have to do this.
There's no
We don't want to
expenses.
set a precedent.
yeah, that's why I
We need
said.
No expenses.
the audience to be quiet, please.
All right, so David, you don't think we should pay them because we're setting a precedent?
I think the superintendent should submit it when it comes with all the other TDE forms at a regular scheduled meeting, and we pay it like we would anybody else. If he sent people to
But if they're not
identify
at work,
bombs
they
or,
wouldn't need TDE.
or go see how a dog is trained to smell gunpowder, or, there's all kind of things. We
That's not
fought
a
dogs in the
This is
sheriff's
a
office.
contentious issue, David.
I don't-
This is like walking on eggshells.
I don't see it like you guys see it. I see it as
No.
let's moving forward and doing something, but
Oh,
I want the attorney to make sure we're not setting a precedent here on TDE.
Well,
Yeah, I can hear it. I hear you.
I don't think that this is a precedent that you'd be setting. I think this is a
very unique situation.
in light of a time element, in light of a new law that came into being just weeks ago.
It's like, Don, where is he?
And regarding the subject matter of the particular request for the TDE, when the board has not yet approved firearms on schools, when the current policy of the board is a gun-free school zone act compliant setting. I don't believe that you'd be setting precedent, but I understand the superintendent's view that if he wanted to go forward and however the chips fall is where it falls, in my mind, I thought it would be a situation of erring on the side of caution to involve the board with the budgetary matters and the unique position of this law as it stands at this particular time.
Okay.
If he says it's not going to be setting a precedent, and the superintendent doesn't object to that, then I don't have a problem.
Sandy, you were going to
So she want
make,
to restate her
I'd
motion?
like to make a motion
Okay.
that we cover the expenses hourly for the employees who are being trained, both the 10-month and the
Rhonda.
12-month.
Second.
Volunteers.
We can do-
I mean, I don't
Volunteers, how
understand
you-
why we wanted this route. None of them
Yeah.
asked for pay.
No, I don't.
I mean, I don't know, I can't.
That's what
give you
the
enough.
agenda says. The agenda says approval of expenses for school employees to attend guardian training.
I know,
The
but
only
the
expenses on us,
Says 0.
If there's no expenses,
Yeah, he's.
just a
Okay.
regular salary, just,
I mean, if you're making.
for the
a
10 months,
can you
There's
find
no
us some
expenses.
money?
there's no cost, they're volunteering.
I'm not privy to the.
we're not paying.
I know. I mean, they could tell us how many 10-month employees are on the list.
Paying the 10-month employees.
We're only going to
I
pay
just
them if
wanna
we decide to
understand.
pay them.
Right, and that's what we're trying to figure out, right?
They are, if the Guardian program goes through, they would receive a stipend, but we are not paying them any additional money.
You don't want
And you
to-
don't want to.
I didn't say that.
Well,
I'm just saying we are currently not paying them.
Right, but we're saying we would like to. Well, some of us are saying we would like
Okay?
to.
Well, you take action accordingly.
So you make your motion again.
I will, one more time, make my motion. Whether 10 or 12-month employees, those who have volunteered to go through the Guardian program, be paid their regular salary,
Hourly salary.
hourly salary for as many hours as they work during this training.
Okay, and can I get clarification on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it appropriate for me to talk?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm only talking about the 12 month, because they're gonna
Because
get,
they're
be
getting
getting
paid
paid 30
anyway.
hours a week anyway.
And
Right,
he's
that's TD.
them. He's TD'd them, so
they're getting
they're
their
fine.
regular pay, so I cannot pay them more.
No,
I'm
ju-
verifying that.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
I should reword
10
it.
month.
Only the 10-month. Only the 10-month, because his TD
Sharon,
is
how many
okay.
times have you had to change that?
Do you have it? Or should
Okay, are we clear on our motion?
Can you ask Mark Modell?
Mark Modell?
Any problem?
No, I think that what Kathy's proposing is equitable. And
Okay.
there would have been an issue with wage and labor laws potentially.
Yes.
If you didn't do that.
Okay.
Okay. Miss,
And you think it's legal for?
will you say it loudly so every,
Second.
Ms. Gilliard seconds the motion? All in favor of the motion that Ms. Jorgensen has made?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Aye.
So 2 opposed?
David and Nikki.
Okay, 3 in favor, 2 opposed.
President, so it doesn't matter. I mean,
Charlie
y'all-
said we weren't.
I
We have to
Well, he
trust our
doesn't listen.
attorney.
trust our attorney, like Miss Jorgensen too, trust me sometimes, as far as she can throw me.
And I know you've already voted, but can I bring up one more thing?
Sure.
That might be something that brings matters into the light, because timesheets will have to be done. These people will be getting a check when they wouldn't normally, so it'll go through HR, it'll go through human, payroll. I know those are confidential things, but our records are public records, so I don't know now where we stand on that, because if we suddenly pay 10-month people for this,
Well,
Can
when
you-
they start-
Charlie,
Those
can,
records would be exempt from public records requests, and they'll also be receiving a stipend from the state. So if the Guardian program were to be voted and approved on, the same situation would occur where we would not.
it just brings a lot more people into knowing who they are, because I don't have a clue who they are, don't want to know who they are, but now my staff's going to know.
Well, when the stipends come, they're gonna know too, if the Guardian, everybody gets a stipend from the
The
state.
sheriff's office pays that, so we wouldn't know.
Right.
Nobody in the school district would know, because, correct me if I'm wrong, Gabe, but you're paying that stipend to them.
Does the money go through you or
The
us?
money goes through them, we do not
Okay.
see that money.
I would have to wait for an opinion from the Department of Education Office of State Schools as to where that money is actually
going to end up?
Right.
Okay.
According to Joy Frank, it goes to them, it's not in our hands.
Okay.
And that was the comment, I said I wanted to say something, and I will say it quickly, because our 3:30 meeting was
Yeah, I
supposed to
need
start.
to wrap things up.
I've been criticized, the board has been criticized for not making a decision in 94 days. This board is ethical, and we do not violate the Sunshine Law. Therefore, we have had about 6.5 hours to discuss this very important matter that we take very seriously. We love these kids as much as anybody else. I promise, nobody loves them more than we do. And we get upset because we're working hard and we're trying to do the right thing, not a political thing. For once you have a board that's not political, we're trying to do the right thing. The newly created School Safety Department under the DOE that was created by this law opened last week. They have hundreds of questions from all 67 districts in the state that they haven't begun to answer. This board member, I'm not voting on anything until I have those answers. So it's been a rush, push, like it was after 9/11 up north when everybody thought planes were going to come out of the sky and hit all the high buildings. And I understand the panic, and I understand, God forbid, something happens. But you know what, with or without the Guardian program, God forbid something happens. That's my speech. Thank you.
Okay, and I would like to say my last little bit. The motion carries. The meeting is adjourned.